Hey there, my name is Fela Abiyoye, and this is How to Corporate, my digital show about how successful professionals navigate career moves and money matters. Today's topic, How to Corporate Overseas, with my guest, Brandon Cheatam. All right, welcome back, guys. Got a special guest today, my boy, Brandon Cheatam. He's had some really unique experiences along the way, not only as you can imagine with the title today, How to Corporate Overseas. He's lived in a bunch of different places, but did a good stint in London for about 4 years, and brings some really unique experiences there. Just, especially think about today's world where people are just honestly living anywhere and, figuring out opportunities where they can work, maybe for US based companies, but how do you do that overseas, right? That's, especially if you're young or you want to travel or, you just open opportunities like that. I think it's really cool perspective to hear from. So we got Brandon today to talk through some of that, man. So again, man, welcome. Really appreciate you taking the time out for sure to be a guest today. And I guess to start off, man, you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, we've been knowing each other for a long time.
A little while.
Yeah, just a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, so my background, degree wise, I have a BS in civil engineering. So I've been working in oil and gas for about 12 years. Most of my experience is, and I don't know how familiar folks are kind of with oil and gas industry, but kind of more like project management, operations support. I was living in New Orleans for about 6 years. So right after school, I lived there for about 6 years. Lived in Houston for a few years. I was working a rotational assignment. So in New Orleans, I was based out of the office. And when I moved back to Houston, I was rotating offshore. So I was working 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And at the time I was working at a deep water facility. So about a 45-minute helicopter flight to the production facility.
So wait, you were taking a helicopter?
Yeah, so when I was living in Houston, yeah, I think you just get used to it. So when I was living in Houston, in order to go to work, I would drive from Houston to South Louisiana. So maybe like 2 hours south of Lafayette, also kind of between New Orleans, but to the coast. I would catch a helicopter, so it was a 45-minute helicopter flight, and then I would be offshore. So it was like 20,000 plus, feet of water.
I high key would be very nervous for 45 minutes on a helicopter.
Yeah, it's not bad, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, it's not bad. So on that particular facility, it had accommodations for about 140 people.
Okay.
And we had internet, gym, TV, but it was a production facility, so we were, separating oil, gas, and water.
Pretty much, right?
It's a facility, not a rig. So a rig drills. And people make as a comment.
Hey, yeah, no. Hey, I'm ignorant to it, man. So educate me, please. So I don't know the difference.
Yeah. So it didn't have a drilling rig kind of drills what we would say wells into the ground. A facility is more about extracting kind of that oil, gas, water, fluid mixture. Gotcha. And then once it's on the facility, the key piece is all of the equipment is all about separating oil, gas, and water. So you take the gas, you route it, and then you want to be able to kind of sell it if you can. The oil, you want to be able to sell that, and then the water, you want to be able to clean it up. Of course, the kind of regulatory standards, and then you discharge it back offshore. So the whole production facility is all about separating oil, gas, and water. There's a bunch of ways to do that. So I did that for a couple years, and then I moved to London doing a project assignment. It was kind of a mix of a project engineering supply chain role. So I was managing a number of global suppliers for this particular project. Each one of these suppliers had a different deliverable that they needed to provide as part of the project. So I was managing a supplier that was based outside of Milan in Italy. That was a pipeline suppliers. I had a supplier that was in Shanghai that was providing some electrical and instrumentation supplies. I had a supplier that was outside of Frankfurt, Germany. I was managing some deliverable work out of New Delhi. And then also another supplier in Atyrau, Kazakhstan. So when I was in London, I was for work, I was probably traveling at least a week or two out of the month alone for work, between Shanghai, Italy, New Delhi, Atyrau, in addition to kind of any personal travel.
So,
and of course, this is all pre-COVID.
Yeah. No, most definitely. so what made you want to do that, man? I mean, I know, we've known each other for years, and I always remember you talking about maybe want to have opportunities to, work overseas. Like, did you join some kind of rotational program, or what made you want to go to London specifically, or even just work overseas in general, man?
Yeah, I think I've always had an interest in working overseas. Just someone who likes to travel and just kind of the curiosity to see different parts of the world. And there just happened to be opportunities for global positions kind of within my company for certain project assignments or certain rotational assignments. So I had expressed interest and kind of made my interest known, but the timing wasn't necessarily planned, honestly. I actually thought I was going to or in my mind, potentially going to a different role in this London opportunity. Kind of came up last minute, but I was definitely open to it, and it worked out. But I know a number of companies will, specifically global companies will have different types of assignments for different offices, throughout the world, or different project assignments as well.
Where there are a lot of folks like yourself, expats where, from America, from the States, working in England, all kind of under the same umbrella, or were you kind of one of a few right out there until you kind of, learn the lay of the land? How'd that work out?
Yeah, so within my company, I was probably, I'm guessing here a little bit, maybe one of 50 or 100 folks at one point in time, at least kind of as far as a U.S. citizen.
Yep.
Through, this particular company on this project assignment. But in general, there are tons of U.S. expats living in London and throughout the UK.
Okay. So real quick. Can you, what is an expat? I only know this because I know you, but for anybody listening who doesn't know what an expat is, can you explain what that is?
It's just short for expatriate. So someone who is leaving their home country, or the country where they have citizenship, and going work. Typically a fixed period of time. You aren't necessarily moving to that country to stay.
Okay.
Right. You're on a temporary visa that has certain time requirements, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. Right. So, and maybe it's a term that maybe it's just used more in expat circles. I don't know. I've been familiar with it, but it could just be terminology through work. But yeah.
Got you.
But yeah, there are a lot of U.S. citizens working in London and throughout the UK, even more so, more than I thought.
Really?
And there are a lot of Black or African American U.S. citizens working in the UK, tons of them. And I was really surprised just by the size of the community. And not only folks working in, honestly, I was probably maybe one or two folks that are working in oil and gas. Majority of them are working in probably corporate law or, attorneys in some capacity, finance, consulting, a number of entrepreneurs, a lot of people working in tech. So you start to kind of realize how big the community is, not only the expat community, but also what I'll say is kind of the Black expat community, start getting connected with folks and just learning about their experience. A lot of Black expats living in London, a good number of them have attended HBCUs. A good number of them have gone on, whether they've attended an HBCU, a number of them have attended, Ivy League schools for their graduate studies. You start. Mm-hmm.
No, so I was going to say, what the people that you kind of came across, where a lot of them had the similar story to you, where, okay, I started off working in the States and, I want to live overseas, or I have an opportunity to work overseas and done that? Or are you saying you see a lot of folks who just, their whole career is, just overseas, right? I mean,
it's a little of both. I mean, it's probably, I'm thinking about it, there's probably one category where people who have moved to London through their company, right? Okay. Similar to like myself.
Yep.
There are a number of people who have went to like graduate school, whether it's an MBA or some other program in London, and then found a work opportunity after graduation and end up continuing to live there and work there. There are folks who have left, one company and moved to London to specifically work with a UK-based company. And potentially they're on like a UK payroll versus maybe a US payroll. And then there are some folks who are entrepreneurs who have, there's, an opportunity they were pursuing within London. And I mean, it can vary. And sometimes people, I noticed that the majority of Black expats, I felt like, weren't necessarily tied to one place. I think after you go through kind of your first kind of experience living abroad, you really feel like you can live anywhere. And, some people kind of identify London or, it's kind of the place that they feel like works best for them, right? Okay. It's a big city. I mean, kind of like a sister of New York in a sense, a little bit smaller, but still kind of pretty fast paced. It has an international airport. You can get anywhere. So some people feel like that's a good middle ground, especially if they have found some issues with living in the US. Maybe they feel like, it's better suited.
Hold on. Are you saying you knew people were going over there to escape? Or
I'm not saying people were going over there to escape, but I mean, I do know some people who have moved to London and said, "Hey, I'm just going to stay here because I feel like this place,
more opportunities."
More opportunities, or I like the my way of life here, and I feel like potentially there are less overt political or racist interactions. And I'm not saying racism is everywhere, right? And there's nuances and complexities to that, and classism in every country. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. And I'm not trying to give a comparison, but just through the lens of a someone who is a Black expat, heterosexual male in corporate America, through that experience, and other people who potentially are viewing it through, kind of one or, some of the same lenses, felt like living abroad was a better experience for them and their family than living in the US.
So, I mean, how was it, I guess, for you, man, when you compare, like, because I mean, you said it's fast paced, right? I mean, when I think about London, it always feels fast paced, like you mentioned, like a New York, right? I mean, I've gone out there to visit. I guess I've always heard that, maybe overseas, you're expected to kind of take more time to yourself. Maybe you have longer vacation days or holiday. I think that's what they call it, right? And stuff like that. Maybe there's more of a work-life balance, maybe to some degree, compared to how it is in the States. I mean, I'm just wondering from your perspective, seeing both sides, how would you compare maybe just working in general, or how we define like what work looks like here versus over there?
I think as a whole, there's probably more emphasis on taking holiday or vacation time or kind of time to yourself, but I think it's very dependent upon the industry. Like if you're working in finance or in corporate law, you might say, man, you may say you never feel like you get a break, right? Because those are can be very work intensive industries, especially if you're kind of meeting a deadline or trying to turn documents for a client. For me, I was on a project assignment. There are certain deliverables, and I was going there on the client side. I felt like the work was, the pace of the work was pretty comparable to working in the US, but also you recognize that, my team wasn't only just US citizens, there
for sure.
Folks from the UK that are working on my team. So, and then just, there are folks from Northern UK, there are folks from Scotland, there were folks from India on the team, there were folks from, Kazakhstan on the team. And also interacting with all these global suppliers, you really kind of pick up on kind of different motivations, from a kind of a global work perspective. Every part of the world operates in the work environment a little differently, different mannerisms, different ways to interact, different greetings. And, at times they all respond differently, but particularly in the UK, I noticed that they did tend to put a lot of, in my opinion, more emphasis on taking holiday. When I'm off, I'm off.
So is it not taking off, but still answering emails or still being cordial?
Yeah, if I'm leaving at 5 o'clock, I'm not answering emails until I come back the next day, or I'm not answering emails over the weekend when I'm on vacation. I'm gonna be on vacation. There's a lot of emphasis also that I picked up on, is that when individuals are leaving university, sometimes they'll take a year off just to travel, or at some point in your career, in certain workplaces could be encouraged to take a gap year, right? Where you just kind of take a kind of a mental break and kind of reset, and you travel, or maybe you try some type of entrepreneurial venture. But it was pretty common. It wasn't really frowned upon. Versus sometimes in the States, if you were to take that much time off, I feel like you would get questions about, how serious are you about your career? Exactly. Do you really want to,
what are you doing?
Make it to the top? And
yeah. Got you. So, okay. No, man, that's different. What about that? I remember, don't they have a kind of an exercise where at the end of the workday they go drinking, but then
it wasn't uncommon for, a lot of my UK team members to, go to lunch and have a beer or a couple beers.
Okay. So that was accepted. So during the middle of the day.
Yeah. It was, it's pretty widely accepted. I mean, with my particular company as a US based employee, we weren't encouraged to drink during lunch, but if your UK teammates did it, it wasn't a big deal, right?
Okay, well, no, that's definitely different.
And it was honestly, it was pretty common, and it probably happens most places. Fridays, you go to lunch, people start drinking, and maybe they just
work.
just continue, But I think it's just viewed as kind of a team building. The team getting together, hanging out for a little bit, kind of blowing off some steam.
Yeah, I'm gonna need some US-based companies to adopt that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it happens. It probably just depends on what, the industry.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess so. I feel like most Fortune 100, 500 companies are like, no. So, but yeah, no, that's different. That's different. How was it, man? There's always office politics, right? And I always kind of equate office politics as just being the uniqueness of working with people, right? So, and, always plays a factor, especially in corporate America, in one way or the other, written rules, unwritten rules, certain things, nuances that kind of apply depending on, the company you work with or the industry you're in or whatever the case may be. How was it, quote unquote, office politics working overseas or while you were in London, or are there any, or would you see see some comparisons that you felt like, they don't really do this out here, but they do this all the time in America?
I think there are office politics everywhere. And I mean, the political landscape can be different, by company, by team. I think, what I picked up on is that just the way, we communicate, a lot of times it's kind of, someone who's grown up in the US and in certain work environments can be slightly different than in the UK or with other companies or, teams abroad. Sometimes in the US, I feel like we can be pretty straight to the point, kind of blunt, especially someone who's probably been working like engineering operations background versus, now you're with a team in the UK. And sometimes that bluntness or, being kind of, somewhat assertive can rub people the wrong way.
Okay.
And so this isn't necessarily office politics, but it's just a more kind of like recognizing your audience whenever you're kind of communicating, right?
Gotcha.
At times, the humor is different, right? UK humor is very different than US humor.
Like, give me an example. Like, what do you mean?
I was in a meeting and manager, he comes into the room. He's from the US as well. And he was like, what, team, we really gotta, it's 4th and down. We really got to score this touchdown. We really got to get after it. And it was like blank stares in the room because he was referencing football. American football.
Yeah.
And everyone in the room, some people knew, but some people didn't. And they were like, I don't know what this guy is talking about. Right. And so those are little things that you don't think about until you're kind of in those environments. You're like, they actually didn't understand a thing you were saying. Like, you seem very passionate about the message, but I don't think it really landed.
Nah, man.
Right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Or even just how to give feedback.
Okay.
As I was interacting with, different cultures, throughout Asia, East Asia versus, in Europe, everyone receives feedback differently. Right. And, and the channels and how you choose to do that. Some cultures are very big on not being kind of put on the spot.
Yeah.
Right. Or in some cultures, they may feel like there's an issue, but because of who is in the room or that particular setting, it's a little more difficult to kind of extract that information where it's more appropriate to kind of do that in a one-on-one setting. And then kind of like go up the chain and then kind of have that group setting, right? And there's all kind of different dynamics, who sits in the room where. Like when I was in Kazakhstan, if you're going to like a dinner, depending on who's sitting where, there's, who's the more senior person in the room and how folks are supposed to like, who's the first person that's supposed to give a toast. And there's all these little kind of social cues that you start to pick up on. Yeah.
Got you. So no, man, that makes sense. As I think about my own background.
So I don't know if I really kind of tied it. I would say there's office politics everywhere, but to me, it's more,
you think it's just
reading the room. I think being more of kind of a listener and just trying to kind of absorb, and just, the team dynamics, communication styles, motivations, and it can vary too. You could, whether that's someone who's a company employee versus a contractor in another company, right? Yeah. And if there are certain kind of labor laws or just certain customs that they're used to, and now you're kind of disrupting that, right? You really got to kind of go in, and you can't assume that, hey, just because I was doing it here in the States, that's the way that's the way I need to deliver. Yeah. In whether it's in London or elsewhere.
No, man, that's good feedback. I mean, like you said, if you're working for, let's say, a U.S. headquartered company, and you go, live in Kazakhstan or anywhere else, right, overseas, don't assume that how you did it before is going to be the same way that you do it. Because I think that's the thing that certain people from certain countries kind of view Americans like, oh, we're always thinking we just got to do it our way, right? So which I know a lot of people from other countries don't necessarily like, right? So it's important to recognize cultural differences and how that plays a factor, right? So but
even like little interactions, like in Houston, if you're in the office and you're like, hey, how's it going? But you're just kind of walking down the hallway, like you may not necessarily really like all these little pleasantries, like you may not really, you're just really saying hi, but you haven't stopped to really kind of speak to that person.
Yeah.
Like versus if you do that in other parts of the world, that individual is probably stopping, like, and with thinking that you are actually asking them, hey, how's it going? And about to have a conversation versus, like,
no, man, I didn't really want to have a full out conversation. I was just
right. You said it more as just like, hello. Right. And so little things like this, like that, or you learn to be a little more conscious on what exactly you're intending to say and how you communicate. Or someone says, hey, do you want any water? And you're like, no, I'm okay. And sometimes people are like, oh, okay, he doesn't want it. Sometimes people are like, oh, so you're okay. So that means you do want water or you don't want water. Like, what does that okay mean? So
got you.
All these little ways that we're used to communicating with each other doesn't apply. And that's a very like simple example, right?
Yeah. I think even just certain slang words that would have come a part of normal American culture, I think don't translate overseas. And again, I just think about my own background being Nigerian. I always remember one of my cousins who came down to the States and he was in college, and we would just have conversations and I would just say, oh, what's up? He'd be, and he would laugh every time I say, what's up? And I'm like, man, what? Like, what's the problem? He's like, what's up? Like, what's down? Why not what's down?
Yeah.
Like you don't think about it like, oh, okay, well.
Like someone in the UK may say, how do you find it? They're like, oh, you just moved to London. How do you find it? Right. And you're like, how do you find it? What am I looking for? But they're just asking you, how do you like living in? So sometimes it takes a minute to like for it to kind of like register the first time you have that interaction.
Yep. So, I mean, would you say there's a good resource for people to use, to prepare themselves, right? Before kind of maybe educating themselves on the cultural nuances and things of that nature before they kind of go into situations, right? Because I guess what you don't want to do is walk into it's my first day on the job in X country and I just piss everybody off because I just, doing something that I thought is normal, but clearly here it's deemed as offensive. I mean,
I would say there are resources depending on the company. Sometimes they have these cultural awareness courses, like if you're moving to another country, like some of the norms or do's and don'ts. My company has one. I know of other companies that have them as well. So that's a resource. I mean, really talking to, if you have a team member, in your company that's working in that particular office, or kind of networking to get in touch with someone to kind of give you a heads up and really just kind of talk about their experience. To me, I don't know if it's not something you need to like, oh, I need to study up on because I'm going to be pissing everyone off. It's just, just keep an open mind, and people know that you just started working there, right? People are pretty friendly, and people are going to say, oh, when you said this, I thought you meant this, or, hey, what did you mean? And you'll start to pick up that, okay, when I'm referencing this in this particular manner, I'm not very clear, right? And you'll start to pick that up. And so I would say it's really about keeping an open mind, being open to feedback, and just really trying to learn, from the experience and everyone that you're working with. But there are a lot of different resources online. A friend of mine that runs a Black Expat. It's an app, but also the focus is a community to connect individuals to different folks that are working in different parts of the world in different industries, to kind of share their experiences. Facebook is a huge resource. I mean, there are tons of expat groups or groups with individuals living abroad and I found each of those groups and those, individuals within those groups more than willing to connect, share their experience. Because the majority of the time, people are having a really great experience and they want to share that and they want to encourage other people to, experience it for themselves and, work abroad or live abroad as well.
Got you. No, that's really cool, man. I think especially in today's world, we're such a global society and, everything is a click of a button. So there's, a ton of resources, but the stuff that you just don't think about. Right. I mean, but yeah, no, I mean, using social media and Facebook and whatnot. So that's really cool, man. So I did want to kind of get maybe just from a financial aspect, like, how did that work? Like, were you paid in euros or, today? And that may be an ignorant question, right? But
no, I think it's a fair question. It depends on, it can depend on a number of factors. For me, it was a US based company. And I was on an expatriate assignment on a tier 3 visa. So I was being paid in US dollars. Right. And that's something to.
Oh, wait. So back up real quick, because I think that's something to point out too, right? You had to apply for the visa, right, to even get in, right? So even if you're applying for the role and you don't get approved for the visa, then, you can be out of there.
Yeah, you may only be able to stay as long as a tourist can stay.
So boom.
So and the company I went with, they handled all the visa requirements for me. That may not always be the case.
Yeah.
And it is, I don't think it's an extremely daunting task, but it can take some time. It can, take a little bit to kind of read all the requirements, the timing, kind of help push things through. So yeah, you need to be very aware of kind of any kind of visa requirements. In the UK, we had a BRP card, which was kind of like your residency card. So I would have to, technically I was supposed to keep that on me at all times. That was kind of proving that I was a resident of the UK. I never had to show it, maybe once when I was flying into the UK.
Is it kind of like your ID card, like your driver license, like the same way?
Technically, right? Okay. Yeah. And it shows that, hey, this is Brandon. He's on a tier 3 visa. This is kind of the reference number. Gotcha. I was paid in US dollars, but that's something to also keep in mind. You may not always be paid in US dollars. Potentially that work assignment could be paid in the local currency, right? So if I was going to the UK, just hypothetical, potentially if I was put on the UK payroll, now my income looks very different, right? Getting paid in pounds versus US dollars is different. And what's the norm in that country, right? The average paid to an engineer, maybe at kind of the equivalent level. Versus in the US is very different.
Yeah.
The pay structure can be very different, right? I would be making, honestly, I would have been making a lot less.
Oh, really?
Right? If I was getting paid in pounds and based on kind of their structure, right? So that's something to also keep in mind. Even though I was on US payroll, you need to look at the exchange rate. So I was paid in US dollars. I would transfer money into a UK bank account.
Okay.
Right. So you need to understand, okay, if I'm just hypothetical.
Yeah.
$1 or $1,000 in US, that is the equivalent to what in the UK, how far does that really go?
Yeah.
Right. Cool. I'm just thinking kind of cost of living.
Got you. Yep.
So that's something you gotta keep in mind. And then
so if you're always transferring it, you think about the exchange rate. So that means literally the amount's changing like every day, right? So,
yes, the amount is changing.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of different ways you can exchange money. There are all kinds of different like avenues now. Like I was using TransferWise, or it's called Wise now. So it was like a method to transfer money from the US to the UK and back and forth for a pretty low rate. There are a number of different avenues, and you start to get really savvy about moving money around. When you start looking at fees and you're like, hold on, what's going on? So you start doing a lot of research, and that's when you really start reaching back into those communities, those expat communities, and hey, how are y'all moving money around? Like, what is the most efficient and cheapest way for me to move X amount of US dollars to the UK or vice versa, right?
Yep.
And you get hip to it very quickly.
I bet.
Yeah, you're right. And so another where I was going also, so with my particular company, I was paid in US dollars, and I was given certain premiums. So I was giving what they call like a goods and services premium, which is supposed to account for kind of adjustment and cost of living. Like, hey, as a single individual, this is how much you probably spend on groceries, yada yada. I was giving a housing allowance. So you have a number of premiums, so that's something to also keep in mind. Hey,
so were you able to negotiate any of that, right, when you took the role, or was that something just, because the company has, large amount of staff overseas, it's just something that they offer, right? Is that pretty standard?
Yeah.
In most folks that you saw working?
Yeah, in my particular capacity, it was pretty standard. Now, if you are, I believe everything's negotiable.
Facts. Facts.
And my capacity was pretty standard. Like, hey, this is we have a lot of data points on how much it should cost a single person. Now, if you're a family of 4 or 5, and now you have, if you're a family, they'll pay for some of your education costs, and not all. They'll pay for your kids to go to like a private school or give you a set allowance, right? So they'll pay for transportation costs and stuff. So you start looking at like, where am I spending money just in life? And, and you can go back to them and say, hey, I actually think I may need more money for transportation costs. I may need more money. You can negotiate. I'm not going to say it wasn't, you can't negotiate, because I think you can negotiate everything, but they may come back and say, hey, this is kind of the standard.
Got you.
Right. So you should be choosing your battles wisely.
No, but it's just good to point this stuff out, because that's the kind of thing that you may not realize, right? I mean, because it's not the same way as you go get a new role, but maybe you move to a new destination, from going from New Orleans to Houston, right? So maybe you get a relocation package that includes, cost of relocation for moving expenses. Maybe you got to buy out your house or whatever, but you don't even think about, I guess I wouldn't have thought about that, like cost of childcare or, cost of education, all the other kind of things, right?
Exactly. Like, where am I sending my kids to school, right? And, are you going to pay for private school, or are you only paying for certain private schools? Is there already a relationship with specific schools or institutions that I can send my kid there for free? Or are you giving me a lump sum and now it's up to me to pick, right? Yep. Or even, hey, I'm moving to London, but I still have my home in Houston.
Yep.
Potentially your company will say, hey, I'll give you a home maintenance allowance, right? To take care of any kind of things that come up with their home while you're here. So there are a lot of different aspects to it. Not only just the cost of getting there, it's the cost of living, and sometimes it's expenses associated with maintaining what you had in the US.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. Be on the lookout for part 2 of this episode, releasing next week. Make sure you click the subscribe button. Until next time, keep building.